What would you do if you woke up pregnant and alone, abandoned by your husband on a ship in the middle of nowhere? Now, what if I told you he didn't just leave? He's trying to frame you for crimes you never committed. And the only person who can help you is the father you swore you'd never speak to again. This isn't fiction. This is Cassidy Brennan's story. And before we begin, I need you to smash that like button. Drop a comment if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. And subscribe because this ending will blow your mind. Cassidy Brennan's eyes fluttered open to Mediterranean sunlight streaming through the porthole. She reached across the king-size bed, expecting to find Derek's warm body beside her. Instead, her hand met cold, untouched sheets. Derek, her voice echoed through the empty suite. The champagne Derek had ordered last night sat unopened on their balcony table, condensation pooling beneath the silver bucket. This was supposed to be their baby moon. Their last romantic getaway before becoming parents, before their lives changed forever. Cassidy pushed herself up, one hand pressed against her 7-month pregnant belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her confusion. She checked her phone. One text message, sent at 6 in the morning. Emergency in Boston, had to fly back. Stay and enjoy the cruise. Love you. That was it. No phone call, no explanation, just a text message. She dialed his number, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Cassidy walked to the bathroom and splashed cool water on her swollen face. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized anymore. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes. Her auburn hair hung limp around pale cheeks. That pregnancy glow everyone talked about was nowhere to be found. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Brennan, this is housekeeping. Your husband left something for you. Cassidy opened the door to find a middle-aged woman with kind eyes holding a crisp white envelope. Her face carried that carefully neutral expression, service workers perfect when delivering bad news. He said to give this to you after departure, the woman said quietly. The envelope trembled in Cassidy's hands. Inside was a single sheet of hotel stationery. Derek's handwriting, usually so confident, looked rushed and sloppy. Cassidy had to fly back early. Business emergency. Enjoy the cruise. We'll talk when you get home. Derek. No love. No sorry. No explanation for abandoning his pregnant wife on a ship in international waters. The ship's intercom crackled to life overhead. Good afternoon, passengers. This is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard the Mediterranean Jewel. I'm Captain Robert Brennan, and my crew and I are honored to serve you during our 7-day voyage. Cassidy's knees buckled. She grabbed the doorframe while the housekeeper rushed forward to steady her. Captain Robert Brennan, her father, the same man she hadn't spoken to in 4 years, the Navy Admiral who had missed her high school graduation for a deployment, who walked her down the aisle in dress whites but left during the reception for urgent Navy business, who she had sworn would never prioritize duty over family with her own children. Now he was the only person who could help her. The housekeeper guided her to the bed and brought her a glass of water. Are you all right, Mr. Brennan? Cassidy sipped the water and tried to steady her breathing. Yes, thank you for delivering the message. After the woman left, Cassidy sat alone on her balcony, staring at the endless blue Mediterranean. The wind whipped her hair as she tried to process Derek's abandonment. She counted her breaths like her Navy mother had taught her during childhood panic attacks. 4 in, 4 out. 4 in, 4 out. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her father commanded this ship. The same man who had chosen duty over family her entire childhood, who she had distanced herself from after too many missed birthdays and broken promises, who she had vowed would be different with her own children. Now she needed him more than ever. Her phone buzzed. FaceTime call from Jenna Calloway, her college roommate and best friend. Cassidy answered, trying to compose her face into something resembling normal. Hey girl, how's the baby moon? Jenna's face filled the screen, all sharp angles and knowing eyes. 15 years of friendship meant Jenna could read her like a book. Derek left, Cassidy said. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. What do you mean, left? He flew back to Boston this morning. Some business emergency. Jenna's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and protective fury in the span of seconds. He left you 7 months pregnant on a cruise ship in the middle of the Mediterranean. His assistant, Elena, is missing too. The pieces clicked together in Jenna's eyes. That tall brunette who was all over him at the company Christmas party, the one you said made you uncomfortable. Cassidy nodded, feeling foolish for trusting her instinct so little. I should have known. You couldn't have known, Jenna said firmly. You trusted your husband. That's what wives do. But even as her best friend offered comfort, Cassidy felt something shift inside her. Something cold and hard, like ice forming over deep water. I need to face my father, Cassidy said quietly. He's the captain of this ship. Jenna's eyes widened. Your dad, the one you haven't talked to in 4 years. The same. Cass, honey, are you sure you're ready for that? Cassidy looked down at her pregnant belly, at the baby who would be born in less than 2 months, at the future she thought she was building with a man who had just abandoned her without a second thought. I don't have a choice, she said. Not anymore. The elevator ride to the bridge felt eternal. What do you say to the father you've barely spoken to in 4 years? The man whose career always came first, whose duty to country superseded duty to family. The bridge doors opened to reveal a world of sophisticated navigation equipment and officers moving with practiced precision. And there, standing with his back to her, was Admiral Robert Brennan in full-dress uniform. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his posture rigid with military bearing. When he turned around, his ocean blue eyes betrayed genuine concern beneath the professional mask. Victoria, he said, using her full name the way he always did in formal situations. His voice carried the authority of 30 years commanding men at sea. She wanted to cry, wanted to collapse into his arms like when she was 8 years old and had scraped her knee riding her bike. Instead, she straightened her spine and channeled the Blackwood steel she had inherited, whether she wanted it or not. Hello, Dad? The bridge crew pretended to busy themselves with instruments and charts, giving them privacy without actually leaving their posts. Through the massive windows, the Mediterranean stretched endlessly in all directions. No land in sight, no escape route. Her father studied a tablet that a junior officer handed him. His jaw tightened as he read the information displayed on the screen. Your husband abandoned ship at Barcelona, he said in the clinical tone that had defined her childhood. Harbor Master confirms he and a female companion took the 10:15 flight to New York. The professional delivery hurt more than anger would have. Facts, maritime law, chain of custody. Her father reduced her marital crisis to operational logistics, just like he had reduced her childhood to duty schedules and deployment timelines. Elena Vasquez, Cassidy provided, her voice steadier than she felt. His assistant. Her father's expression hardened further. In command situations, he processed intelligence quickly, identified threats, and neutralized problems. How long has this affair been going on, he asked. I don't know, months, maybe years. The admission felt like confessing failure. I ignored the warning signs. She found herself standing at attention despite her emotional turmoil. Military children learn to code switch automatically. At this moment, she wasn't the abandoned pregnant wife. She was the Admiral's daughter, trained from birth to maintain composure under pressure. You ignored nothing, her father said, his voice softening slightly. You trusted your spouse. That's not weakness, Victoria. That's what marriage requires. For a brief moment, she glimpsed not Admiral Brennan, but the father who had taught her to sail during his rare shore leaves. The man who read her bedtime stories via video calls from deployed ships. The father who had cried at her wedding, though he tried to hide his tear behind military stoicism. A commander approached with another tablet. Sir, we've confirmed the Hamilton suite was paid through the full cruise duration. Legally, Mrs. Brennan has every right to remain aboard for the complete voyage. She's not just remaining, her father declared with finality. She's family. My daughter, my grandchild. He turned to face Cassidy directly. Your mother is in our quarters. She's been worried sick since I briefed her on the situation. The words hit her like an unexpected wave. Mom's here. She never misses my deployments, even the ones that masquerade as luxury cruises. The irony struck her forcefully. Her workaholic father, who had missed so many family moments for the sake of duty, now had her mother by his side at sea. Somehow they had figured out how to balance love and career after 30 years of marriage. Why couldn't she and Derek have done the same? Her father walked her through the ship's quarters, pointing out safety features and crew protocols along the way. His naval precision masked deep paternal concern. Every few steps, he glanced at her pregnant belly, calculating due dates and potential medical contingencies. She realized he was doing what Navy fathers do naturally, securing the perimeter, ensuring his family is safety. The ship's doctor is Sarah Mitchell, he explained as they walked. She delivered half the babies born on Norfolk Naval Base over the past 15 years. She'll monitor you and the little one throughout the voyage. It's a boy, Cassidy said. Naval intuition, her father replied with the first smile she'd seen from him. Plus, your mother bought blue booties when we docked in Barcelona this morning. Despite everything, Cassidy found herself smiling back. You two went shopping. Reconnaissance mission. Your mother's direct orders. They stopped outside the captain's quarters. Through the door, she could hear her mother humming softly, the same lullaby Maggie had sung during Cassidy's childhood nightmares, the melody that had chased away monsters and made everything safe again. She's going to want to examine your ankles for swelling, her father warned. Navy nurse habits die hard. Cassidy took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Whatever came next, at least she wasn't facing it alone anymore. The captain's quarters revealed a side of her father she had almost forgotten. Family photographs lined his desk. Her high school graduation, where he'd surprised her by showing up in dress blues. Her wedding day, with Bradley shaking her father's hand in what she now recognized as calculated charm rather than genuine respect. Recent photos of her and Derek that looked staged and artificial in hindsight. Her mother, Patricia, sat in the window seat with afternoon sunlight catching the silver threads in her hair. She was knitting tiny blue socks, her fingers moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades keeping busy during long deployments. "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia said, rising with the fluid grace that all Navy wives eventually master. Her embrace smelled like lavender and strength, the combination that had gotten Cassidy through every childhood crisis. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Cassidy began, feeling tears threaten. "The things I said when you chose Dad's career over being there for me." "Stop right there," Patricia interrupted with the firm voice that had once commanded an entire naval hospital ward. "You were 25 years old, watching your father miss another holiday. You spoke from hurt, not hate. I understood that then, and I understand it now." They settled together on the small sofa, 3 generations of Brennan women in one cramped space. Robert studied maritime charts at his desk while Patricia automatically checked Cassidy's ankles for signs of swelling. Even in the middle of a crisis, they operated like the military family they had always been. Assess the situation, adapt to circumstances, overcome obstacles. Cassidy found herself analyzing the timeline of her marriage, connecting dots she had deliberately ignored for months. The company retreat in Miami last spring. Derek came back different afterward, more secretive. He started working late almost every night, taking weekend calls that supposedly couldn't wait. "When did he hire Elena?" Patricia asked gently. "About 6 months ago. Said she came highly recommended from his business associates." Cassidy laughed, but the sound held no humor. "I bet she did." Her phone buzzed. Text message from Jenna. "Cass, I hacked Derek's credit cards. He bought 2 first-class tickets to New York yesterday. Both used. I'm sending you the details now." Cassidy's phone chimed again. Screenshots of credit card statements, 2 first-class tickets, purchased 48 hours ago, hotel reservation in Manhattan, dinner reservation at Le Bernardin, the restaurant where Derek had proposed to her 3 years ago. He was recreating their courtship with someone else. Her hands shook as she opened Instagram. She searched for Elena Vasquez. The woman's profile was public, filled with carefully curated photos of an aspirational lifestyle. Office shots with motivational captions, gym selfies, brunch with friends. And then, 6 hours ago, posted from JFK Airport Lounge, fresh start, with an airplane emoji and a sparkle emoji. The comment section exploded with congratulations and questions, but one comment made Cassidy's blood run cold. "You deserve this after everything you've been through. So happy for you both." Both. Cassidy scrolled through Elena's feed with methodical precision. 8 months ago, there was a photo from the company holiday party. Elena's hand rested on Derek's shoulder. The caption read, "Best boss ever," with a heart emoji. The photo had 147 likes. Cassidy recognized names: Derek's business partners, his employees, His family, they all knew. Every single one of them had seen this photo and said nothing. Patricia noticed Cassidy's breathing change. "What is it, honey?" Cassidy showed her the phone. Patricia's face hardened into the same steel that Robert wore during battle. "Call him," Patricia said. "Right now." Cassidy dialed Derek's number. Voicemail. She called his office. The receptionist answered on the third ring. "Tech Venture Capital. How may I direct your call?" "This is Cassidy Brennan. I need to speak with my husband immediately." A pause. "I'm sorry, Miss Brennan. Mr. Brennan is on leave indefinitely." Indefinitely. The word felt foreign in her mouth. "What do you mean, indefinitely?" "I'm not authorized to discuss personnel matters. Would you like me to transfer you to his voicemail?" Cassidy hung up. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The baby kicked restlessly. Sensing her stress, she tried one more call. Derek's mother, Catherine Brennan, the Boston blue blood matriarch who had made it clear from day one, that Cassidy wasn't quite good enough for her son. Catherine answered on the fifth ring. "Cassidy, dear, I was expecting your call. Where is Derek?" "He's taking some time to handle business matters." "Surely he told you." "He left me on a cruise ship, 7 months pregnant, with a text message." Catherine's sigh carried decades of practiced disappointment. "Derek mentioned you needed time apart. The pregnancy has been difficult for him. All those hormones, you understand, men need space to process these changes." The casual cruelty took Cassidy's breath away. "Time apart, Catherine. He abandoned me in another country." "Don't be so dramatic, dear. You're on a luxury cruise, not stranded on a desert island. Derek works very hard to provide you with these experiences. Perhaps a little gratitude would be appropriate." Cassidy ended the call. She looked at her mother, who had gone very still in that way military spouses do when preparing for bad news. "His family knew," Cassidy said quietly. "They all knew he was leaving me." Robert set down his charts and walked over to them. He knelt in front of Cassidy, something she'd never seen him do before. "Military men don't kneel, but fathers do. Listen to me very carefully," he said. "Right now, you feel blindsided, betrayed, alone, Dion, but you're not alone. Your mother and I are here, and I give you my word as an officer and as your father, Derek Brennan, will answer for this." Cassidy wanted to believe him. Wanted to let her parents fix this the way they'd fixed scraped knees and broken hearts when she was young. But she was 32 years old, 7 months pregnant, and her husband had disappeared with another woman. Some things couldn't be fixed with naval precision and parental love. Her phone buzzed one more time. Unknown number. The text message made her heart stop. "Cassidy, answer the phone. You're in danger. Derek is not who you think he is." Another text, immediately following. "This is Elena Vasquez. We need to talk, now." Cassidy stared at her phone screen, heart hammering against her ribs. Elena Vasquez. The woman who had just flown to New York with her husband. The woman whose Instagram showed a hand on Derek's shoulder, a caption with a heart emoji. Now that same woman was texting her about danger. "Answer it," Robert said, his command voice leaving no room for argument. "But put it on speaker. I want to hear every word." When Cassidy's finger trembled as she accepted the FaceTime call, the screen filled with Elena's face. She looked nothing like her Instagram photos. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes red from crying. And behind her, visible through the window, was unmistakably a federal building. Cassidy could see the American flag, the stark institutional architecture. "Mrs. Brennan," Elena said quickly, "I have about 5 minutes before my lawyer gets back. I need you to listen very carefully and not interrupt." "Where's my husband?" Cassidy demanded. "I don't know, and I don't know, and I'm not sleeping with him." Elena leaned closer to the camera. "I'm wearing a wire for the Securities and Exchange Commission. I've been recording Derek for 6 months. He's going to prison, and he's trying to take you down with him." The words hit Cassidy like physical blows. Securities and Exchange Commission. Wire. Prison. "I don't understand," Cassidy whispered. "Your husband has been embezzling money from client investment accounts. $47 million over 3 years. He used it to cover gambling debts and maintain your lifestyle. The FBI is raiding his office right now. This moment. As we speak, Patricia gasped. Robert's face went rigid with controlled fury. That's impossible, Cassidy said. Derek's company is successful. We're not living beyond our means. You're living on stolen money, Elena replied bluntly. And here's the worst part. Derek knows I talked to the FBI yesterday. He knows they're coming. That's why he got you on that cruiser ship. He needed you out of the country, unreachable, unable to freeze assets or testify. Testify about what? Cassidy felt like she was drowning. I don't know anything about his business. That doesn't matter. You're his wife. Joint bank accounts. Joint tax returns. Your signature is on documents. Derek's lawyer, Marcus Webb, specializes in spousal blame defense strategies. He's going to claim you were the mastermind, that Derek was manipulated by his ambitious wife who wanted an expensive lifestyle. Your pregnancy will be painted as strategic timing, designed to gain jury sympathy. The room tilted around Cassidy. She gripped the arm of the sofa, feeling her blood pressure spike dangerously. Why are you telling me this? She managed to ask. Elena's expression softened slightly. Because I watched him destroy 3 other people's lives before I agreed to help the FBI. Because I know what he's capable of. And because you deserve to know the truth before he burns your entire life to the ground. Robert leaned into the camera frame. This is Captain Robert Brennan, United States Navy, retired. Are you telling me my daughter is being framed for federal crimes? Elena nodded. That's exactly what I'm telling you. And you need to get her legal representation immediately. Like yesterday, immediately. What about you? Cassidy asked. If you're testifying against Derek, won't he come after you? Something flickered across Elena's face. Fear, maybe, or resignation. I'm in FBI protective custody. I'll be fine. But you need to protect yourself. Right now. How? Cassidy heard the desperation in her own voice. How do I protect myself from this? First, don't try to access your joint bank accounts. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to Derek if he calls. Get a lawyer who specializes in white-collar crime defense. And whatever you do, don't go back to Connecticut until this is resolved. A knock sounded on Elena's side of the call. A man's voice. Miss Vasquez, we're ready for you. I have to go, Elena said urgently. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. I know this isn't fair, but life isn't fair. And Derek Brennan is about to learn that the hard way. The call ended. Cassidy sat in stunned silence. Her father was already on his phone, pacing the small cabin like a caged predator. Her mother held her hand, squeezing so tightly it almost hurt. Henry, Robert said into his phone, I need you. Now. My daughter's in serious trouble. Captain Henry Walsh had been Robert's roommate at the Naval Academy. Now he worked as Port Authority Director in Miami, specializing in legal issues affecting military families. The man who had helped Cassidy's parents navigate Navy bureaucracy for 3 decades. Robert put the phone on speaker. Henry's gravelly voice filled the cabin. Bobby, talk to me. What's going on? Robert explained the situation in rapid-fire military briefing style. Facts only. No emotion. When he finished, Henry let out a low whistle. That's bad, Bobby. Real bad. But it's not hopeless. If this Elena woman has recordings proving Cassidy's innocence, we can work with that. I'll make some calls. Get someone from my firm to start filing protective orders. We'll freeze what we can. Establish a paper trail showing Cassidy had no knowledge of the fraud. How long do we have? Robert asked. If the FBI is raiding Derek's office today, the story will hit the news by tonight. Maybe tomorrow morning at the latest. We need to move fast. Get ahead of the narrative. Cassidy listened to them strategize, feeling like a spectator in her own life. This morning, she'd woken up on her baby moon. Now she was apparently married to a criminal who was trying to frame her for his crimes. Can I still go home? She asked quietly. After the cruise, I have doctor appointments. The nursery isn't finished. All my things. Henry's voice gentled. Cassidy, honey, I'm going to be straight with you. You might not have a home to go back to. If Derek used your joint assets to commit fraud, the government can seize everything. Your house, your curtains, your bank accounts, everything. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting. Cassidy placed both hands on her belly, trying to calm him, trying to calm herself. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Right now," Henry said, "you stay on that ship with your parents. You're in international waters, which gives us time. Time to build your defense. Time to separate your assets from Derek's. Time to make sure when this story breaks, you're positioned as the victim, not the villain." "But I am a victim," Cassidy said. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know that," Henry replied, "and we're going to make damn sure everyone else knows it too." After the call ended, Cassidy stood on the balcony of her parents' quarters, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean. The sky turned shades of orange and pink and purple, beautiful and indifferent to human suffering. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jenna. "Just saw the news. Derek's office was raided by FBI. It's all over social media. People are asking about you. What do you want me to tell them?" Cassidy typed back with shaking fingers. "Tell them nothing. I'll handle it." But even as she sent the message, she had no idea how to handle any of this. How do you defend yourself against accusations you don't even understand? How do you prove your innocence when your signature is on documents you barely remember signing? How do you survive when the person you trusted most in the world has turned out to be a monster? The baby kicked again. Cassidy looked down at her belly, at the innocent life growing inside her, a life that would be born into this nightmare in less than 2 months. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't going to protect her son from what was coming. Only she could do that. And Cassidy had no idea if she was strong enough. Cassidy woke the next morning to her phone vibrating nonstop. 37 missed calls, 114 text messages. Her social media notifications had climbed into the thousands overnight. She opened her news app with trembling fingers. The headline made her stomach drop. Tech CEO's pregnant wife, mastermind or victim. The article featured a photo of her and Derek at a charity gala 6 months ago. She wore a designer gown, diamonds at her throat. Derek's arm wrapped possessively around her waist. They looked wealthy, powerful, guilty. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the investigation. Someone who knew details that only a few people could know. Details about her morning sickness, her cravings for pickles and ice cream at 2 in the morning, her anxiety about becoming a mother. Personal details that could only have come from someone in Derek's inner circle, or from Derek himself. Cassidy scrolled through the article, each paragraph worse than the last. Sources say Cassidy Hamilton, formerly Cassidy Brennan, daughter of retired Navy Admiral Robert Brennan, has always aspired to a certain lifestyle. Friends from college describe her as ambitious and status conscious. That was a lie. Cassidy had worked her way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. She'd never cared about status or wealth until she met Derek. The couple's lavish wedding 3 years ago featured a custom Vera Wang gown and a performance by a Grammy-winning artist. The reception cost an estimated $300,000. Derek had insisted on the expensive wedding. His family had paid for it. Cassidy had wanted something small and intimate. Mrs. Hamilton drives a BMW X7 valued at $85,000. The couple's Connecticut estate is worth $4.2 million. Her engagement ring alone cost $150,000. Everything purchased with money she now knew was stolen. Money that came from people who trusted Derek with their retirement savings. Cassidy felt bile rise in her throat. She barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick. Patricia found her there 15 minutes later, curled on the cold tile floor. "Don't read the articles," her mother said firmly. "They're lies designed to sell papers." "But what if people believe them?" Cassidy whispered. "What if everyone thinks I'm guilty?" Patricia helped her to her feet, wet a washcloth with cool water, and pressed it to Cassidy's face. "Then we change the narrative." Patricia said, "We fight back." But fighting back proved harder than either of them anticipated. By noon, Cassidy's Instagram had been flooded with comments. Death threats mixed with accusations. People she'd never met calling her a gold digger, a manipulator, a criminal. Someone had found her college party photos, normal pictures of a 20-year-old having fun with friends. The photos were now being shared with captions like, "Unstable party girl who trapped a wealthy man with a pregnancy." Her LinkedIn profile was screenshot and analyzed. Every job she'd ever held was scrutinized for evidence of ambition or greed. Someone even found her grandmother's obituary from 10 years ago. The obituary mentioned that Cassidy's grandmother had left her a trust fund. The fund totaled $50,000, meant to help with graduate school. Now it was being spun as evidence that Cassidy came from money and was accustomed to wealth. Jenna called, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. Cass, someone leaked your private messages to Derek. The ones where you talked about wanting to buy a house in Connecticut. Cassidy's heart sank. Those messages were about us house hunting together. I never pressured him to buy that mansion. He insisted on it. I know that. You know that. But they're taking your words out of context and making you look like you were demanding expensive things. Who would do this? Cassidy asked, though she already suspected the answer. Derek's mother gave an interview to the Boston Globe this morning. Jenna said, she said, and I quote, Cassidy always wanted the finer things in life. Derek was too kind-hearted to see her manipulative nature. We tried to warn him. The betrayal cut deeper than Cassidy expected. Catherine Brennan had never liked her, but this was something else entirely. This was warfare. What do I do? Cassidy asked. We need to release a statement, something that tells your side of the story. But before they could craft any kind of response, another bomb dropped. A local news station in Boston aired an interview with one of Derek's former business partners. The man claimed that Cassidy had frequently attended company meetings, that she'd been involved in business decisions, that she'd even suggested some of the investment strategies that turned out to be fraudulent. It was completely untrue. Cassidy had attended exactly 3 company events in 3 years of marriage, all of them holiday parties. She'd never been to a business meeting, never seen financial documents, never made investment suggestions, but the man spoke with such conviction, such detail, that viewers would have no reason to doubt him. He's lying, Cassidy said to her parents. I've never even met that man. Robert pulled up a photo on his tablet. This man, Vincent Crawford, I don't know his name. I've never seen him before in my life. Robert showed the photo to Patricia, who shook her head. I don't recognize him either. He doesn't exist in any of Derek's company records, Robert said grimly. No employee by that name, no business partner, no vendor, nothing. Then who is he? Cassidy asked. An actor, Patricia said quietly. They hired an actor to go on television and lie about you. The realization was somehow worse than the betrayal itself. This wasn't just Derek trying to save himself. This was an organized campaign to destroy her. Someone was coordinating these attacks, planning them, funding them. Marcus Webb, Derek's lawyer, the man who specialized in destroying witnesses to save his clients. By sunset, Cassidy's name was trending on social media. The hashtag GoldDiggerGate was being used by thousands of people who had never met her and never would. People who felt entitled to judge her based on carefully edited information and outright lies. Her panic attack hit without warning. One moment she was scrolling through Twitter. The next she couldn't breathe. Her vision tunneled. Her heart felt like it was trying to break free from her chest. Patricia and Robert found her on the deck, hyperventilating, clutching the railing for support. The ship's doctor arrived within minutes, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a no-nonsense demeanor. Blood pressure is 160/105, Dr. Mitchell announced. That's dangerously high for someone 7 months pregnant. She shined a light in Cassidy's eyes, checked her reflexes, measured her pulse. If this continues, we'll need to consider early delivery, Dr. Mitchell said quietly. The stress is putting both you and the baby at serious risk. They're going to kill my baby with lies, Cassidy gasped between breaths. Patricia knelt beside her, taking both of her hands. Listen to me. Breathe with me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Come on, baby girl. With me. They breathed together until Cassidy's heart rate slowed, until her vision cleared, until the panic receded enough for her to think again. I can't do this, Cassidy whispered. I can't fight this. They have lawyers and money and a whole system designed to destroy people like me. People like you, Robert's voice was sharp. You mean innocent people, people who trusted the wrong person. I mean people who don't matter. Cassidy said, I'm just collateral damage in Derek's escape plan. Robert crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. You are not collateral damage. You are my daughter. You are a Brennan, and Brennans don't surrender. But they're winning, Cassidy said. Every hour, more lies, more attacks, More people believing I'm guilty. They're not winning, Patricia said firmly. They're desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Cassidy wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that truth would eventually prevail. But in her experience, truth was often the first casualty in any war. And this was war. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her click accept. Cassidy Brennan, a woman's voice. Professional, controlled. Yes. This is Special Agent Rita Owens with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need to speak with you about your husband's case and about Elena Vasquez. Cassidy's blood ran cold. What about Elena? A pause, then Ms. Vasquez was found dead in her apartment this morning. We're treating it as a homicide. The world stopped spinning. Elena was dead. The words echoed in Cassidy's mind as Special Agent Owens explained the details over the phone. Elena Vasquez, the woman who had called Cassidy yesterday to warn her about Derek, had been found in her Boston apartment with a single gunshot wound to the head. Initial investigation has suggested a professional hit, Agent Owens said. Clean, efficient, no witnesses, no forced entry. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Cassidy gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Derek did this. He had her killed. We can't confirm that yet, Agent Owens replied, but her tone suggested she agreed. That's why I'm calling. You could be in danger. Mrs. Brennan, if your husband is willing to eliminate witnesses, she didn't need to finish the sentence. If Derek would kill Elena to protect himself, he might come after Cassidy too. What about the recordings? Cassidy asked. Elena said she had evidence. Did you find it? Her laptop and phone are missing, likely taken by whoever killed her, but Agent Owens paused. Elena was smart. She sent backup files to our field office last week. We have copies of everything. Your husband doesn't know that yet. It was the first piece of good news Cassidy had heard in 48 hours. So you can still prosecute him. We can, and we will, though, but the case just got more complicated. Murder charges take time to build, and your husband's lawyer is very, very good at creating reasonable doubt. After the call ended, Cassidy sat in stunned by silence. Her father's quarters felt like a cage. The luxury cruise ship felt like a prison, 7 months pregnant, trapped in international waters. While her husband orchestrated her destruction from somewhere in the United States, Henry Walsh called an hour later with news that was somehow even worse. Cassidy, I need you to sit down for this. She was already sitting, but her father and mother moved closer, flanking her like protective guardians. Derek emptied all your joint accounts yesterday, Henry said. Every single one. Your savings, your checking, the trust fund your grandmother left you, gone. How much? Cassidy asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. $840,000. The number was so large it didn't feel real. Nearly $1 million, everything she had, everything she'd saved, everything her grandmother had left her for graduate school and emergencies. Gone. There's more, Henry continued. The house is double mortgaged. Derek took out a second mortgage 6 months ago without your knowledge. The bank is going to foreclose within 60 days. He can't do that without my signature, Cassidy protested. He forged it. We can prove it's forgery, but that takes time. Time you don't have. The bank wants their money now. Cassidy felt like she was drowning. What about my credit cards? Maxed out, all of them. He did it yesterday. Probably trying to prevent you from accessing any funds. My car, lease was in the company's name. They've repossessed it. My health insurance, canceled as of this morning. Technically, you were covered through Derek's company plan, but since he's been terminated and the company is under investigation, all employee benefits were suspended. Cassidy's hands moved to her pregnant belly. I don't have health insurance. I'm 7 months pregnant and I don't have health insurance. We're working on emergency coverage through the Navy, Henry said quickly. Robert's military benefits can be extended to family members in crisis situations. It'll take a few days to process, but you'll be covered. A few days, Cassidy's voice rose. What if something happens before then? What if the baby comes early? The ship's doctor is excellent, Patricia interjected. You're covered here. It's when we get back to the States that we need to worry. Cassidy did the math in her head. She had $247 in her personal checking account, the account she'd opened before marrying Derek and had mostly forgotten about, an account with her grandmother's bank. Too small for Derek to have bothered tracking. $247. That was all she had in the world. No home, no car, no job, no insurance, no savings, and a baby due in less than 2 months. "How did this happen?" she whispered. "How did I become this person?" "You didn't become anything," Robert said firmly. "This was done to you, by someone who planned it meticulously." Henry cleared his throat over the phone. "There's one more thing. Derek's lawyer filed an emergency motion this morning. He's requesting custody of the unborn child." "What?" Cassidy's voice cracked. "He can't do that. He abandoned us. His argument is that you're mentally unstable, that you fled the country with stolen money, and that you're unfit to care for a child. He's using your current location, the cruise ship, as evidence that you're irrational and irresponsible. I'm on this ship because he left me here. I know, and we'll argue that. But Marcus Webb is very good at twisting facts. He's also claiming that your father's history of military deployments and absence during your childhood proves that you come from an unstable family background." Robert's face went red with suppressed fury. Patricia's hand found his, squeezing tight. "So Derek gets to steal everything, possibly murder a witness, and frame me for his crimes," Cassidy said slowly. "And the legal system is going to reward him with custody of our baby." "Not if I can help it," Henry said. "We are filing counter motions today, but you need to understand this is going to be a fight. A long, expensive, ugly fight." "I don't have money for a long, expensive fight," Cassidy said. "I have $247. "You have me," Henry replied. "Pro bono, no charges. And I'm bringing in some favors from colleagues who owe me. We'll build you a legal team that can match Webb's resources." "Why?" But Cassidy asked. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because Bobby Brennan is my oldest friend, because I've watched you grow up since you were 8 years old, and because I'm sick of watching powerful men destroy women's lives and walk away clean." After Henry hung up, Cassidy sat very still, trying to process the full scope of her situation. She was broke, homeless, uninsured, 7 months pregnant, accused of crimes she didn't commit, fighting a custody battle against a man who might be a murderer, while trapped on a cruising ship in the Mediterranean with the father she hadn't spoken to in 4 years. "I need some air," she said quietly. Patricia started to stand. "I'll come with you." "No," Cassidy held up a hand. "Please, I just need a few minutes alone." She walked to the ship's upper deck, to a quiet corner where other passengers rarely ventured. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and gold, beautiful and completely indifferent to human suffering. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "How does it feel, Cassidy, to have nothing to be nothing? You should have signed a prenup. Now you get to learn what life is really like for people who aren't protected by wealthy husbands." The message was unsigned, but she knew it was from Derek, or from someone working for him. She started to delete it, then stopped, started to respond, stopped again. Finally, she typed, "I'd rather have nothing than be married to a monster." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. 3 dots appeared immediately. Derek was typing, "You're carrying my son. I'll get him eventually, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you weren't strong enough to protect him, just like your father wasn't strong enough to protect you." The message hit exactly where Derek intended. Cassidy's childhood wounds, her father's absences, the voice in her head that had always whispered she wasn't good enough, strong enough, worthy enough. But something else was happening too, something cold and hard forming in her chest. Not despair, not defeat, rage. Derek had miscalculated. He'd assumed that destroying her financially would break her completely, that taking everything would leave her with nothing to fight for. But he'd forgotten the most important thing. She wasn't fighting for money or houses or reputation anymore. She was fighting for her son, and a mother protecting her child was the most dangerous creature on earth. Cassidy looked down at her pregnant belly, at the baby who would be born into this nightmare, the baby Derek thought he could use as a weapon. "He's wrong about me," she said aloud to the sunset, "and I'm going to prove it." Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jenna. I'm flying to France. Meeting you when the ship docks in Nice in 3 days. You're not doing this alone. Pack your courtroom face because we're going to war. Cassidy smiled for the first time in 2 days. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized they had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing to lose are dangerous. The pain started at 3 in the morning. Cassidy woke to a sharp, cramping sensation low in her abdomen. Not the usual pregnancy discomfort. Something different, something wrong. She stumbled to the bathroom, one hand pressed against her belly. When she turned on the light, she saw blood. Not a lot, just a few drops. But at 7 months pregnant, any bleeding was a medical emergency. "Mom," she called out, her voice breaking with fear. "Mom, I need help." Patricia appeared within seconds, still in her nightgown, instantly alert in that way military nurses learn to be. She took one look at Cassidy and her face went pale. "Robert, call Dr. Mitchell. Now." The next 15 minutes were a blur. The ship's doctor arrived with her medical bag, conducting a rapid examination while asking calm, efficient questions. How long had she been bleeding? Was the pain constant or intermittent? Had she felt the baby move recently? The baby's heartbeat is irregular. "Dr. Mitchell announced, pressing a portable fetal monitor against Cassidy's belly. "And her blood pressure is dangerously high, 175 over 110. "What does that mean?" Cassidy asked, though part of her already knew. "It means we need to get you to a hospital. Now, the nearest facility with a neonatal intensive care unit is in Nice, France, about 4 hours away by ship." 4 hours, Patricia's voice was sharp with fear. "She might not have 4 hours." Dr. Mitchell's expression was grave. "I can perform an emergency cesarean section here if necessary, but at 31 weeks, the baby will need immediate NICU care." "There's no NICU aboard this ship." "What are our options?" Robert asked, already in command mode, strategizing. "We radio for a Coast Guard helicopter medevac. They can have her at the hospital in Nice within 90 minutes. "Do it," Robert ordered. The next hour felt like a nightmare. Cassidy lay on a gurney in the ship's small medical bay while Dr. Mitchell monitored her constantly. The baby's heartbeat fluctuated wildly, too fast, then too slow, then racing again. Patricia held Cassidy's hand, murmuring reassurances that felt increasingly hollow. Robert paced like a caged animal, checking his watch every 30 seconds. The pain intensified. Not quite labor contractions, but something close. Cassidy's body was preparing to deliver, whether it was time or not. "The stress is triggering preterm labor," Dr. Bob Mitchell explained. "Your body thinks you're in danger. It's trying to deliver the baby to protect both of you." "But he's not ready," Cassidy gasped between waves of pain. "It's too early. He needs more time." "I know," Dr. Mitchell said softly. "But sometimes our bodies make decisions for us." The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the night. Coast Guard rescue. Patricia helped Cassidy into a flight suit, strapping her carefully into the gurney while Dr. Mitchell prepared emergency medical equipment. "I'm coming with you," Patricia announced. "No, Claire," Robert said. "You are needed here to handle communications with the legal team. I'll go." It was the first time Cassidy could remember her father choosing her over duty, choosing family over command. The realization made her cry, which only made the pain worse. The helicopter ride to Nice was turbulent. Cassidy drifted in and out of consciousness, hearing fragments of conversation between the flight medic and her father. Blood pressure still climbing. Baby's heart rate dropping. ETA to hospital, 12 minutes. Just at some point, her phone rang. Patricia must have slipped it into her pocket. Cassidy saw Derek's name on the screen before her father grabbed the phone and declined the call, but not before she heard Derek's voice on the voicemail he'd left earlier. "I heard about the medical emergency. I'm sorry it came to this, Cassidy, but you brought this on yourself. You should have just cooperated, signed the papers, given me what I wanted. Now you're going to lose everything, including our son, and it's your own fault." The casual cruelty in his voice cut through her pain. He wasn't calling because he cared about her or the baby. He was calling to twist the knife, to make sure she understood that even this, her medical emergency, was somehow her fault. Robert saw her expression and squeezed her hand. Don't listen to him. He's trying to break you. He already did, Cassidy whispered. No, Robert said fiercely. You're still breathing, still fighting. That means he hasn't won. The hospital in Nice was state-of-the-art, staffed with efficient French medical personnel who spoke excellent English. Within minutes of arrival, Cassidy was in an operating room, being prepped for an emergency cesarean section. The baby is in distress, the obstetrician explained in accented English. We cannot wait any longer. We must deliver now. Will he survive? Cassidy asked. At 31 weeks, our NICU is one of the best in Europe. We have saved many babies born even earlier, but I cannot promise you certainty, only that we will do everything possible. Cassidy looked at her father, standing at the edge of the operating room in surgical scrubs. He looked older than she'd ever seen him. Scared, vulnerable, human. I'm not going to die. Am I? She asked. No, Robert said firmly. You're a Brennan. We're too stubborn to die. The anesthesiologist injected something into her IV line. The world started to blur at the edges. If something happens to me, Cassidy said, fighting to keep her eyes open, promise me you won't let Derek near the baby. Promise me. Nothing is happening to you, Billionaire, Robert replied. But I promise, I promise. She felt the pressure of the surgery but no pain. Heard voices speaking rapidly in French. Felt a strange tugging sensation. Then, impossibly, the baby's cry. Weak and thin, but unmistakably alive. Un garçon, someone announced. A boy, 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Cassidy tried to see him, but medical staff surrounded him immediately. Tubes and monitors. Rapid, efficient movements. The NICU team taking over. Is he okay? She called out. Is my baby okay? He is breathing, the doctor said. That is good, but the next 48 hours are critical. He is very small, very fragile. They wheeled the baby past her, just close enough for her to see his tiny face. Eyes closed, skin nearly translucent. So small he fit in one of the nurse's hands. I love you, Cassidy whispered. I love you so much. Please be okay. Please. Then he was gone, rushed to the NICU, and Cassidy was left in the operating room, feeling the surgeons close the incision, listening to her father's voice as he called Patricia with the news. It's a boy, 3 pounds, critical condition. Cassidy's stable. I'm not leaving her side. When they wheeled her to recovery, Cassidy felt hollowed out, not just from the surgery, but from everything. The betrayal, the financial ruin, the media attacks, and now this, her baby, born 10 weeks early, fighting for his life in a foreign country. She'd never felt more alone in her life. Her phone buzzed. Text message. Not from Derek this time, from his mother. I heard about the birth. Premature. I understand. Perhaps this is God's way of showing you that you weren't ready to be a mother. Derek will be filing for full custody as soon as the child is stable enough. It's for the best, dear. You've proven you can't protect him. Cassidy stared at the message until her vision blurred with tears. Even now, even with her son fighting for his life in the next room, Derek's family was weaponizing her trauma. She deleted the message. Then she opened her text thread with Jenna. Baby born at 31 weeks. Critical condition. Nice, France. I need you. Jenna's response was immediate. Already on a plane. Landing in 6 hours. Hold on. Cassidy closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Only fear. Only the steady beep of monitors. Only the knowledge that she'd brought a child into this nightmare. And somewhere out there, Derek was planning his next move. Cassidy was allowed to see her son for the first time 6 hours after the surgery. A nurse wheeled her in a wheelchair to the NICU, a sterile room filled with incubators and monitors and the soft sounds of breathing machines. Her baby lay in a clear plastic box, tubes running from his tiny body to various machines. He wore a diaper that looked impossibly large on his small frame. His chest rose and fell rapidly, working hard with each breath. He's a fighter, the NICU nurse said in gentle, accented English. Very strong for such a small one. Cassidy reached through the incubator's portal, touching her son's hand with one finger. His fingers were so small, they barely wrapped around her pinky. Hey, little man, she whispered. I'm your mom. I'm so sorry this happened. I'm so sorry you had to come into the world this way. The baby's eyes remained closed, but his fingers tightened slightly around hers. He can hear you, the nurse said. Talk to him. It helps. So Cassidy talked. She told him about his grandfather, the Navy admiral who commanded ships and men, but cried when he held his daughter. She told him about his grandmother, the strongest woman she'd ever known. She told him about Jenna, who would be the best aunt any kid could ask for. She didn't tell him about his father. There would be time for that conversation later, much later, when he was old enough to understand that some people aren't capable of love. Robert appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 coffees and looking exhausted. Patricia sends her love. She's handling the media inquiries. Apparently, the story of the CEO's wife having an emergency delivery has made international news. Of course it has, Cassidy said bitterly. Everything about my life is public property now. Robert sat beside her wheelchair, both of them staring at the tiny baby fighting for life in the incubator. What are you going to name him? Robert asked. Cassidy hadn't thought about it. She and Derek had discussed names months ago, but nothing felt right anymore. Those conversations belonged to a different life, a different marriage. James Robert, she said finally. After you. Wanted Robert's eyes filled with tears. He tried to hide it, turning away, but Cassidy saw. I don't deserve that, he said quietly. After all the times I wasn't there for you. You're here now, Cassidy replied. That's what matters. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. Cassidy Brennan. A woman's voice. Professional. Controlled. Yes. This is Special Agent Rita Owens, FBI. We need to talk about Elena Vasquez's murder. The happiness of meeting her son evaporated instantly. Cassidy switched the phone to speaker so Robert could hear. What about it? She asked. We've traced communications from Derek's phone to a known contract killer. Text messages, arranging payment, instructions for the hit. Everything we need to charge him with murder for hire. Cassidy's hands shook. You can prove Derek killed Elena. We can, and that's not all. Elena sent us something before she died. A package that arrived at our field office this morning. A flash drive with 3 years of recordings and documents. Video testimony she recorded a week before her death. What kind of testimony? Everything. Derek's embezzlement, his gambling debts, the threats he made against former employees, and information about 2 other suspicious deaths of people who worked for his company. Robert leaned forward. 2 other deaths. 1 apparent suicide, 1 car accident. Both former employees who were preparing to blow the whistle on Derek's activities. Elena investigated them. She believed they were murdered to keep them quiet. Guess that he felt sick. How many people has he killed? We're still investigating. But the pattern is clear. Derek Brennan eliminates anyone who threatens to expose him. Then I'm next, Cassidy said quietly. I'm the biggest threat of all. That's why I'm calling. Derek's current location is unknown. He cleared out his office, emptied his properties, and disappeared 48 hours ago. We have reason to believe he fled the country. We're tracking multiple leads, but his family has resources, money, connections. He could be anywhere. Robert's face went hard. What about protection for my daughter? We can arrange for surveillance when she returns to the United States. But right now, being in France might actually be safer. He's less likely to make a move in a foreign country where he has fewer resources. After Agent Owens hung up, Cassidy sat in stunned silence. Derek wasn't just a thief and a liar. He was potentially a serial killer, a man who eliminated problems by murdering people. And she was carrying his child. I want to change James's birth certificate, Cassidy said suddenly. I don't want Derek's name on it. Can I do that? Robert nodded. In France, you have more control over birth certificates than in the US, especially given the circumstances. I'll contact a lawyer here. Jenna arrived 3 hours later, looking rumpled from the overnight flight, but immediately alert. She took one look at Cassidy and pulled her into a fierce hug. Okay, Sanj, Jenna said, pulling back. What's the situation? Cassidy explained everything. The FBI investigation, Elena's murder, Derek's disappearance, the custody battle, the media circus. Jenna listened without interrupting. her lawyer brain processing every detail. "Here's what we're going to do," she said finally. "First, we hold a press conference. Tell your story. Control the narrative before Webb twists it further." "I can't face cameras like this," Cassidy protested. "I just had surgery. My baby is in critical condition." "Exactly. You're sympathetic. You're vulnerable. You're a victim. Webb has been painting you as a gold-digging mastermind. We need to show the world who you really are." Robert nodded. "Jenna's right. The longer we wait, the more control Webb has over public opinion." "What do I say?" Cassidy asked. "The truth." Jenna replied simply. "You loved your husband. You trusted him. You had no idea he was committing crimes. And when you found out, he tried to destroy you to save himself. That's not complicated. It's just true." They held the press conference 2 days later in a conference room at the Nice hospital. Cassidy sat in a wheelchair, still recovering from surgery. Robert stood behind her, in full uniform, a show of strength and support. Jenna handled the media questions with practiced efficiency. The questions were brutal. "Did you know about your husband's embezzlement?" "No, I had no access to his business accounts or decisions." "Did you benefit financially from the stolen money?" "I believed we were living within our means. I now know the money was stolen, and I'm devastated for the victims." "Why did you go on a cruise when your husband's company was under investigation?" "I didn't know about any investigation. My husband told me it was a baby moon, a vacation before our son was born. I found out about the investigation after he abandoned me." "Some people say you're using your pregnancy to gain sympathy," Jenna cut in sharply. "My client went into preterm labor due to stress from her husband's betrayal and the media harassment. Her son is currently in the NICU, fighting for his life. Anyone who thinks that's a sympathy play is delusional." The press conference was carried live by major news networks. Within hours, public opinion began to shift. The hashtag changed from Gold Diggergate to Justice for Cassidy. Military families rallied around her. Navy wives who understood what it was like to trust your spouse completely. Veterans who recognized the name Brennan and respected Admiral Robert's service. Derek's lawyer, Marcus Webb, released a statement claiming Cassidy was playing the victim. But his words rang hollow against the image of a woman in a wheelchair, talking about her premature baby while fighting back tears. 3 days after the press conference, Agent Owens called with news. "We've located Derek. He's in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, living under a fake passport." "Can you extradite him?" Cassidy asked. "Brazil doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. for most crimes. But murder changes things. With Elena's case and the evidence of other deaths, we have leverage. The Brazilian government is under pressure from the international community. How long will it take? Could be weeks, could be months, but we'll get him eventually." Cassidy hung up and looked at her son in his incubator, James Robert, now 8 days old and slowly gaining weight, still tiny, still fragile, but fighting. "Your father is a fugitive," she told him quietly, "living in another country, hiding from justice. Part of me hopes they never find him. Because if they do, I'll have to face him again, and I don't know if I'm strong enough for that." But even as she said it, Cassidy knew it was a lie. She was strong enough. She'd survived everything Derek had thrown at her. The betrayal, the financial ruin, the media attacks, the medical emergency. She'd survived all of it. And when Derek was finally brought to justice, she'd be there to watch him fall. 6 days after the press conference, Special Agent Owens called with news that should have been a triumph. Derek Brennan has been arrested in Rio de Janeiro. Brazilian authorities are cooperating with extradition proceedings. He'll be back in the United States within 2 weeks to face charges. Cassidy should have felt relief, victory, justice. Instead, she felt numb. "What happens now?" she asked. "He'll be charged with securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and murder for hire. With Elena's evidence and the testimony we've gathered, we have a strong case. He's looking at 40 years to life. 40 years. Derek would be in his 70s before he saw freedom again. Their son would be middle-aged before his father left prison. Good, Cassidy thought. Let him rot. There's something else, Agent Owens continued. Derek's lawyer wants to negotiate. He's offering a full confession and guilty plea in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? Cassidy asked. Suspicious, reduced sentence, minimum security facility, and Agent Owens paused. He wants you to provide character testimony at his sentencing hearing. You're joking. I wish I was. Marcus Webb thinks if you stand beside Derek in court, showing family unity and forgiveness, it might convince the judge to be lenient. Absolutely not, Cassidy said flatly. I won't help him get a lighter sentence. He's offering financial compensation in exchange, full restitution for everything he took from you. The house, the money, everything transferred to your name, clear of criminal liability. Cassidy was silent for a long moment. The offer would solve every practical problem she faced. She could provide for James, have a home, rebuild her life without struggling financially. All she had to do was stand beside the man who had tried to destroy her and pretend she forgave him. Tell Webb the answer is no, she said finally. There isn't enough money in the world to make me help Derek escape justice. Agent Owen sounded relieved. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll let Webb know. 2 weeks later, Cassidy stood at the hospital's full-length window, watching her son sleep in his incubator. James was now 3 weeks old and had gained almost a full pound. The doctor said he could potentially go home in another 2 weeks if he continued to improve. Home. Cassidy didn't have a home. She'd been living in a hotel room near the hospital, paying with money Henry Walsh had wired from an emergency fund. Patricia had joined her in France, while Robert returned to the cruise ship to finish his contract. Jenna had flown back to the States but called every day with updates on the legal proceedings. Derek's been extradited, Jenna reported. He's in federal custody in Boston. Arraignment is tomorrow. Webb is still trying to negotiate, but the prosecutor isn't budging. Derek's going to trial. Good, Cassidy said. There's more news. Remember Derek's mother, Catherine? Unfortunately, she gave another interview. This time, she said Derek is a victim of mental illness, that he's not responsible for his actions. She's trying to build an insanity defense. Cassidy laughed bitterly. Derek isn't insane. He's a narcissist. There's a difference. I know, and so does the prosecutor. With Elena's recordings, there's clear evidence of premeditation and planning. An insanity defense won't fly. Over the next few days, news coverage of Derek's case dominated headlines. His mugshot appeared everywhere disheveled, unshaven, barely recognizable as the polished CEO he'd once been. Public opinion had turned decisively against him. The documentary that was being produced had become a cultural phenomenon. Cassidy's story resonated with people who had been betrayed by those they trusted most. Support groups formed online. Women who had experienced similar situations reached out to share their stories. The hashtag Navy Strong was trending, with military families rallying around one of their own. For the first time since this nightmare began, Cassidy felt like she might actually win. And that's when Derek made his final move. Cassidy was at the hospital, holding James for the first time outside his incubator. He was wrapped in a tiny blanket, breathing on his own, no longer needing the respirator. The NICU nurse hovered nearby, monitoring carefully, but she was smiling. He's doing so well, the nurse said. A miracle, baby. This one. Cassidy looked down at her son's face, finally able to hold him properly. He was still small, still fragile, but alive, fighting, surviving. Her phone rang. Agent Owens. Cassidy, we have a problem. Derek escaped from federal custody 2 hours ago. The words didn't make sense. How does someone escape from federal custody? His mother arranged it. She hired a former military contractor to break him out during a medical transport. They're both gone, Derek and the contractor. We have alerts out at every airport, every border crossing. But he could be anywhere, Cassidy finished. We're sending protection. Agents will be at the hospital within the hour. Don't leave until they arrive. He's coming for me, Cassidy said quietly. Isn't he? We don't know, but we're not taking chances. The nurse must have seen Cassidy's expression change because she immediately took James and returned him to his incubator, locking the security protocols. What's wrong? The nurse asked. My husband escaped from prison. He might come here. The nurse's eyes widened. She moved to the NICU phone, speaking rapidly in French to hospital security. Within minutes, armed guards appeared at the NICU entrance. The hospital went into lockdown. No one in or out without proper identification. Cassidy sat beside James's incubator, one hand pressed against the clear plastic, feeling helpless. She'd thought it was over, thought Derek was safely locked away, thought she and James were finally safe. She'd been wrong, Jenna called, her voice tight with controlled panic. I just heard, are you okay? FBI is sending protection. The hospital is locked down. We're as safe as we can be. This is insane. His mother broke him out of federal custody. She's going to prison for this. She doesn't care, Cassidy said. She'll sacrifice anything to protect her son, even her own freedom. That's not love. That's enabling a monster. Patricia arrived at the hospital an hour later, having taken a taxi from the hotel at dangerous speeds. She was carrying a small bag. What's in the bag? Cassidy asked. Robert's service pistol. He overnighted it from the ship. It's legal in France under military treaty provisions. Patricia's face was grim. If Derek shows up here, he's not getting near my grandson. The FBI agents arrived shortly after. Two serious-looking men in dark suits who positioned themselves outside the NICU entrance. They had photos of Derek, descriptions of possible disguises, and a direct line to French police. We've issued an international arrest warrant, one agent explained. Derek Brennan is now considered armed and dangerous. If he attempts to contact you, do not engage. Call us immediately. Night fell. The hospital lights dimmed. Cassidy refused to leave James's side, sleeping in a chair beside his incubator while Patricia kept watch from the doorway. At 2 a.m, Cassidy's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. You think you've won. You think you're safe. But you're not. You'll never be safe. I'll find you, and I'll take my son, because he's mine. Not yours. Mine. The message was unmistakably from Derek. Cassidy showed it to the FBI agents, who immediately began tracing the signal. It's coming from a burner phone, one agent reported. Location services disabled. Could be anywhere, but Cassidy had a terrible feeling she knew exactly where Derek was. He was close, very close, and he was coming for James. The next 72 hours were a blur of police activity and escalating security. Derek's text messages continued, each one more threatening than the last, but he never appeared at the hospital. He never tried to contact her directly. Instead, he was arrested 3 days later, trying to board a private plane in Marseille. Airport security recognized him from the international alert. He was taken into custody without incident, though he tried to bribe the officers with money he'd hidden in offshore accounts. This time, there would be no escape. Derek was transferred to a maximum security facility. His mother, Catherine, was arrested for aiding and abetting a fugitive. Marcus Webb withdrew from the case, unwilling to touch the scandal any further. Derek's trial became a media sensation. The evidence was overwhelming. Elena's recordings, bank statements, witness testimony from dozens of people Derek had defrauded, and the attempted escape sealed his fate. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: securities fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, murder for hire, escape from federal custody. The judge sentenced him to 45 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Cassidy watched the sentencing via live stream from her hotel room in France. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, just emptiness, where love used to be. James was released from the NICU 2 weeks later, healthy and growing stronger every day. Cassidy flew back to the United States with her parents, settling temporarily in Navy base housing while she figured out her next steps. The house in Connecticut had been seized by the government, but Henry Walsh's legal maneuvering had protected Cassidy's grandmother's trust fund. The money Derek had stolen was recovered and returned to her. Not a fortune, but enough to start over. She found a small apartment in San Diego, near her parents in the Navy base, found a part-time job doing remote marketing work, started therapy to process the trauma. Jenna visited every few weeks, bringing wine for Cassidy and stuffed animals for James. You know what the ironic thing is, Jenna said one evening, holding James while Cassidy made dinner. Derek thought destroying you financially would break you, but you're tougher broke than he ever was with millions. Cassidy thought about that, about the person she'd been when she married Derek. Insecure, desperate for approval, willing to ignore red flags to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, scarred, but unbreakable. 2 years passed. James grew into a chatty, energetic toddler with his grandfather's ocean blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. He called Robert Papa and Patricia Nana and had no memory of the man who was biologically his father. Cassidy had built a small but stable life. Her marketing consulting business was growing. She'd paid off her debts, started saving money, made friends in her apartment complex. She dated occasionally, though she was cautious, wary. It would take a long time before she trusted anyone completely again. One Saturday afternoon, she took James to the beach near their apartment. He played in the sand, building castles and chasing seagulls, while Robert helped him collect shells. Patricia sat beside Cassidy on a beach blanket, knitting another pair of tiny socks, even though James had long since outgrown the need for baby clothes. "You're happy," Patricia observed. "I can see it in your face." "I'm tired," Cassidy corrected. "Broke, traumatized, but yeah, I guess I'm happy too. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. I didn't have a choice." "We always have choices," Patricia said gently. "You chose to fight. You chose your son over convenience. You chose truth over comfort. Those were brave choices." James ran up to them, hands full of shells and sand. "Mama, look, I found a big one." Cassidy examined the shell with appropriate enthusiasm. "That's beautiful, buddy. Should we save it for your collection?" "Yes, and Papa says we can make a picture with shells later." He ran back to Robert, who was demonstrating the proper technique for building sandcastle walls. The sight of her father, the stoic Navy Admiral, on his hands and knees in the sand with her son made Cassidy smile. They'd come so far, she and her father. 4 years of silence, ended by crisis. But the crisis had given them something back. A relationship, real communication, vulnerability. Her phone buzzed. Email notification from the documentary producers. The film about her story. The vanishing CEO had just won an award at a film festival. They wanted to fly her to New York for the ceremony. Cassidy deleted the email. She'd told her story, done the interviews, helped make sure other women knew the warning signs of financial abuse and manipulation. But she was done being a victim, done being a survivor, done being anyone's cautionary tale. She was just Cassidy Brennan now. Single mom, marketing consultant, daughter, friend. That evening, after James was asleep in his blue-themed bedroom, Cassidy stood at her apartment window looking out at the San Diego skyline. Navy ships moved in the harbor, heading out for exercises or returning home to waiting families. She thought about Derek, locked in a federal prison somewhere, thought about the life they'd had together, the lies she'd believed, the warning signs she'd ignored. And she realized something important. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy she didn't have to spare. Hate meant he still had power over her emotions. She'd taken that power back, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, therapy session by therapy session. Derek Brennan was a chapter in her life, a painful, traumatic chapter, but just a chapter, not the whole story. The whole story was still being written, and she was the one holding the pen. Her phone rang. Jenna, calling late as usual. "Hey, Cassidy answered. "What's up?" "Nothing, just wanted to check in, make sure you and the little man are good." "We're good. Great. Actually." "Liar. You're exhausted and broke and probably eating ramen for the third night in a row." Cassidy laughed. "Second night, I had pizza yesterday. There's my girl. Listen, I have a friend who needs marketing help for her startup. San Diego based. Good money. Flexible hours. Interested. Send me the details." "Will do." And Cass. "Yeah, I'm proud of you. You know that, right? What you did, what you survived, how you rebuilt. Most people couldn't have done that." "I had help," Cassidy said, looking at the photo on her fridge. Her, James, Robert, and Patricia at the beach, smiling, together, whole. "Yeah, but you had to accept the help. Had to trust again after being betrayed. That's the hard part." After they hung up, Cassidy checked on James one more time. He slept peacefully, clutching a stuffed dolphin Patricia had bought him. His chest rose and fell steadily. Healthy, safe, loved. She thought about what people always asked her, the question that came up in every interview, every conversation with other survivors. Do you regret marrying him, knowing what you know now? Would you do it differently? The answer was complicated. Yes, she regretted the pain, the trauma, the years of lies, the financial devastation. But if she hadn't married Derek, she wouldn't have James. And James was the best thing that had ever happened to her. So maybe the real question wasn't whether she regretted the past. Maybe the question was whether she'd let the past define her future. And the answer to that was simple. No. Derek Brennan had taken almost everything from her. Her money, her home, her trust, her sense of security. But he hadn't taken her will to fight, her capacity to love, her ability to rebuild. He'd tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd forged her into something stronger. And that strength would carry her through whatever came next. Through single motherhood and financial struggles and the long process of healing from trauma. She was 34 years old, broke, scarred, exhausted, and absolutely unbreakable. Cassidy turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, bills to pay, a toddler to chase, a business to build, a life to live. But tonight in her small apartment, with her son sleeping safely in the next room, Cassidy Brennan was at peace. She'd survived the storm. And storms, she'd learned, only make the calm that follows feel sweeter. The best revenge, she'd discovered, wasn't destroying Derek or making him suffer. The best revenge was waking up every morning and choosing to live fully, freely, and without fear. And that was exactly what she intended to do. For herself, for James, for every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't strong enough, smart enough, or worthy enough to survive being broken. She was proof that you could lose everything and still win. That you could be betrayed by the person you trusted most and still learn to trust it again. That you could fall apart completely and put yourself back together into something better. As she drifted off to sleep, Cassidy's last thought was simple. She'd done it, against all odds, against a system designed to protect powerful men, against media attacks and financial ruin and attempted murder. She'd done it. She'd survived. And that was enough. That was everything.